Too Much Information is a production of iHeart Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Too Much Information, the show that gives you the secret histories and little-known fascinating facts and figures behind your favorite movies, music, TV shows, and more. We are your two appliance repairmen of Apocrypha. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh.
And Jordan, today we are continuing our long-standing tradition of delving deeply into children's movies that are directly responsible, anecdotally at least, for severely traumatizing their intended audience for the rest of their lives. Having covered horse murder and weirdly erotic sentient goo villains and just Christopher Lloyd being himself.
Yeah. And Christopher Lloyd as himself.
We now move on to the movie that showed us that household appliances were not only self-aware and had independent lives, but that they were capable of deep, fathomless suffering, mental and physical. That's right. We're talking about Brave Little Toaster, which turned 35 this year.
Wow.
Truth be told, I watched this movie as a child, I'm guessing a number of times, as was my wont, but my only memory of it until now was the Jack Nicholson air conditioner blowing himself up and dying, although I am told that he is repaired at the end of the film.
He is, yes.
Yeah, but that's all I carry with me from this movie, and I have never watched it again. But I will say that in doing my research for this, I have come to a deep, abiding love of director Jerry Rees, who is just this elfin little presence of can-do-itiveness and positivity, and I would protect him, and I love him, and he must be saved from the evils of the world. What about you? Talk to me about Brave Little Toaster.
Yeah, my chief memory of this movie was the AC blowing up. That was pretty horrifying. Let's also not forget the time that Kirby the vacuum cleaner tried to eat his own cord rather than cross a waterfall. That one really stuck with me. That's why I'm a broom guy to this day. Whenever I accidentally
Ladies and gentlemen, I am a broom man. If I say I'm a broom man, you will believe me. I'm a broom man and a family man.
And let's not forget the nightmare scene with the killer clowns and the toaster being pursued by forks and knives while suspended over a bathtub, which is yet another seeming nod to suicide in this movie that's ostensibly for children. So that's weird. Oh, yeah. And then the scene where the beat up old cars are singing about their lives as they're going to be crushed to death in the junkyard. Yeah. It's worse than Cats for me. Pretty much, now that I think about it, this really has a whole buffet of trauma. We've not done a kids movie that was like actually just cute and cuddly.
No.
Everything has had a traumatic element to it. So that's
not
that's
a movie.
Fun.
I mean, the closest thing we've done is like Rugrats and Blue's Clues.
Yeah. At least this movie had the electric blanket, which was adorable.
I hate that fucking blanket.
Really? Why?
Yeah, it's a little crying, little crybaby, crying all the time. Suck it up, kid.
But yeah, I love this movie. I was always really into Alice in Wonderland and surreal Lewis Carroll-like stuff, and this kind of always seemed cut from the same cloth. Because, I mean, it's bizarre. Like, why is a toaster the hero of your movie? I mean, I admire that now. In a lot of ways, it seemed like a dry run for the Toy Story franchise, which we'll touch on later. Yeah, I mean, the comparisons are many. They're both stories of abandonment, loneliness, and wanting to be reunited with the one you love. And yeah, I mean, really, the plots are kind of identical. Inanimate objects dealing with the fact that their beloved owner has grown up and doesn't want them anymore. In a lot of ways, it's far sadder than Toy Story, because at least toys, you have some element of like sentimentality and connection towards.
Yeah.
You know, kids not going to care about throwing out a toaster or an old vacuum cleaner. So that's sad. They go on this life-altering journey to seek out their master. Just like Toy Story 3, there's a climactic scene at the junkyard where these appliances have to face their own mortality. And, you know, it's funny. This movie sparked what I took to be a semi-serious theoretical, ethical debate about the rights of AI appliances. Did you see this? There's a piece on dailydot.com called How the Brave Little Toaster Predicted Our Robot Future, which posits the question, would designing a sentient being to operate with a singular function be a form of enslavement?
It's like one of the most famous like Rick and Morty jokes is he builds a little robot at the kitchen table and it passes him the butter. It like picks up the butter dish and rolls it over to him and drops it off. And he goes, "What is my function?" And he goes, "You pass the butter." And then the little guy just goes, "Oh God." And he goes, "Yeah, join the party, pal."
So this was all interesting to me, but I was also an extremely sensitive kid to the point where it was almost debilitating. So this movie gave me a complex about getting rid of all appliances and likely contributed to my pack rat tendencies. I do wonder how many kids developed a weird fixation to toasters after this movie came out.
Well, I mean, no one talked about it in any of the making ofs or anything, but it's Shintoism. It's the Japanese religion that everything has a spirit.
Yeah.
You know, the closest modern analog I can think of it is Marie Kondo, and she personifies stuff in terms of being I'm not a condo person. I've never condoed anything in my life. I'm a hoarder, but treating your clothing and your objects with love because they serve you, and just the idea that things do have spirits. So yeah, a rich text, as they used to tell me in English college. Well, the film has been seemingly memory holed by the House of Mouse, so future generations are, depending on how you look at it, either safer from debilitating trauma or deprived from an excellent piece of fallen between the cracks animation. But either way, from the truly astounding array of 90s animation royalty who worked on this movie to the interior Disney drama that threatened the film at its genesis and end, to the long and wild and sad career of the man who wrote the original book, here is everything you didn't know about the brave little toaster. Thomas M. Dish, the guy who wrote the novella that the film adapts, had a tremendously far-ranging career as an author and took a similarly tremendously far-ranging route to get there. He was raised in Iowa and Minnesota, and he displayed an early love for the written word when he relays this anecdote. He had been given the assignment to memorize 100 lines of poetic verse by a teacher, and he memorized 1,000. To which I say, good on you, you overachiever. He had one of those really wild mid-century American CVs that a lot of these writers have. He worked a job as a trainee steel draftsman. He was an extra at the Metropolitan Opera House for multiple productions after he moved to New York. He worked at bookstores, newspapers, ad agencies, coat room attendant at a theater, an insurance company. He was a bank teller, and he worked as a mortuary assistant at a funeral home. But in what will become a recurring theme in his life, he battled severe depression. He attempted suicide at the age of just 18 by sticking his head into his gas oven, but failed because he had not paid the gas bill.
Wow, that's like a Woody Allen punchline.
It's a real truth is stranger than fiction.
Wow.
He enlisted in the army around this time, but was so traumatized by the experience that he was committed to a mental institution for 3 months.
Wow.
But none of that stopped him from writing.
Yeah, thank God. He had an incredibly varied writing career. Aside from writing science fiction, he wrote, obviously, children's books, but also horror, literary and theater criticism, plays, a libretto for an opera of Frankenstein, which rules, and many volumes of poetry. Have you seen this Frankenstein libretto?
No, I haven't. Did you look into it?
I haven't been able to find it. I would love to see that. And then in 1990, one of his plays called The Cardinal Detoxes drew a cease and desist order from the Catholic Archdiocese of New York because it was staged in a small experimental theater housed in the Most Holy Redeemer Church.
Did you look up the plot?
I haven't looked up the plot, but wasn't there a church near Meatpacking District that was turned into a club in the 90s for all the club kids?
I don't know about that, but the reason the church came down on him for this was he admittedly wrote it to piss them off. It is the story of an alcoholic cardinal going cold turkey detoxing I think either in a rehab facility or in a jail cell. And it's just a monologue. It's a one-person play of a guy getting the shakes and the DTs and withdrawing from alcohol and just ranting and raving. And he was a very anti-religious tract. And it was staged in a church.
Wow.
So the archdiocese came after him for it.
Apparently this was a fairly mainstream controversy, which is impressive considering it's this off Broadway.
Yeah.
And the archdiocese supposedly placed pressure on the Department of Buildings to close the building down on show night. So they really went after him.
Of course they denied it, but everyone involved in it was of course they did that. Of course they leaned on the Department of Buildings to go in and be it's unsafe.
Well, isn't the Catholic Church the largest private landowner in New York City?
That
At least they were.
As you can perhaps see by now, Dish was, to put it mildly, a complicated guy. Despite working frequently in the sci-fi genre, he trashed a lot of the names, the sacred cows of the canon. Guys like Robert Heinlein, he did this in a 1975 essay provocatively titled "The Embarrassments of Science Fiction." He panned Ray Bradbury in the New York Times, which is like, panning Jesus for sci-fi nerds, and then subsequently never got another assignment from the Times over that review, supposedly. He then wrote a book about the genre in the 90s that took a very confrontational stance towards it. And my personal favorite, he had a feud with another acclaimed sci-fi writer, Philip K. Dick. He of writing the book Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep that Blade Runner was based on, and The Man in the High Castle, among many others. Dick, who infamously gobbled amphetamines like Tic Tacs, there was a period of his life when he was writing a series of paranoid screeds, missives to the FBI, and Dish came up in one of these. Dick suggested to the FBI that there were a series of coded messages prompted by a covert organization in one of Dish's novels, Camp Concentration. Nothing ever came of this. The FBI correctly deduced that Dick was a crazy person, and that was the end of that until, in his final novel, The Word of God, Dish wrote an extended scene in which Philip K. Dick is dead and in hell with writer's block. It is a weird score settling.
Yeah, two really weird guys having a really weird feud.
But he did there was begrudging respect there.
Yeah, towards the end of Dish's life, he was very forgiving of Philip K. Dick, very aware that he was going through a troubled period. I can't even call it a period in his life. He was a troubled person. In an interview with the website Lingua Franca in 2001, Dish talks about what rough shape Philip K. Dick was in. He said, quote, "At this point in the early and mid-1970s, Dick was really freaking out on drugs, almost the horror pharmacopoeia except heroin. The drugs didn't destroy his gift entirely, even at his nadir, but they did make it impossible for him to distinguish between self-interest and pose imp of the perverse." I don't know what that means, but I love it. He loved to make trouble. Philip K. Dick's a really interesting guy. There was an incident in early 1974 where a person, I believe his drug dealer, came to his door and he became transfixed by the necklace that this woman was wearing. And as he admired it, a sun ray reflected off of it and it created this sort of pink beam of light, so he says at least. And Philip K. Dick became transfixed by this pink beam, and he became convinced that this beam of light imparted wisdom and special powers to him. And soon after, he came to believe that he was living two parallel lives, one as himself, Philip K. Dick, and one as Thomas, a Christian persecuted by Romans in the 1st century AD. So that's interesting.
Yeah, Gnosticism, which is the big heretical movement of the 2nd century of the Christian church, people have called his later writing, as he got into this Catholic phase, that like he was basically writing Gnostic science fiction.
Wow.
He's such a fascinating guy, man. You ever seen Scanner Darkly?
Yeah. The old Rotoscope movie from 05.
It's just like every plot that dude did was a result of eating so many amphetamines. Because it's all just like you start questioning your reality and like, am I who I say I am? It's like, yes, those are fertile concepts for science fiction, but also you ate so much speed. Like, this is why your mind is fracturing. We talked about this in an earlier episode, but somebody talked about him having a bowl of pills on his kitchen table, the way that some people have like nectarines. He would just gobble them while he was writing. Anyway.
Well, it reminds me of in the way that he read Dish's novel and basically read it as having coded messages to him. It reminds me of Brian Wilson, my hero from the Beach Boys, became convinced that his one-time mentor and then rival Phil Spector was trying to sabotage him and had bugged his house and was sending him messages through movies. There's a famous story of Brian Wilson going to the movie theater to see a movie called Seconds with Rock Hudson, this weird sci-fi movie. And I guess Brian was late and he walked in a few minutes into the movie, and right when he walked in, a character on the screen says, "Hello, Mr. Wilson, have a seat." And this completely blew Brian's mind, and he was convinced that Phil had somehow gotten in touch with the producers of the movie to put this line in there to screw with Brian's head. Yeah, I mean, again, both of these men, Philip K. Dick and Brian Wilson and Phil Spector, were all not we're not operating with a clean bill of mental health, shall we say. But
moral of the story of this tangent, kids, is lay off the Adderall.
or acid or speed or whatever it is. Yes. Anyway.
Moderation, folks.
Yes.
The
TMI way.
Moderation.
Anyway, back to the brave little toaster. This episode's going to be a hell of a ride already, I can tell. Dish, the man who wrote the Brave Little Toaster novella, he was a gay man who lived with the same partner for decades. And as you mentioned earlier, he really struggled with depression and despondent after his partner's death and really drained mentally from their fight to keep their home, as well as his battles with diabetes and sciatica. He died by suicide in 2008. He shot himself. And a friend told the New York Times for his obit that Dish spoke, quote, often and frankly about suicide and had once pitched a calendar with a famous suicide on each day of the year, like Sylvia Plath's on February 11th. This is the mind that brought us the story of an anthropomorphic toaster and a vacuum cleaner who tries to suck up his own cord. So yeah, there's a real darkness there. Although in the movie, the movie was definitely took a lot of liberties with his text, I should say.
Yeah, and we'll find that out later. But he may be the most complex figure to ever have something adapted into Disney, outside of, like, I don't know, Victor Hugo with, like, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. But, like, good Lord, what a life. Anyway, Brave Little Toaster first appeared as a novella in the August 1980 issue of the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. It was nominated for both a Hugo Award and a Nebula Award. Those are the big, prestigious sci-fi literary awards. The novella was later published as a book in May of '86, but even that was an uphill battle for him as well. Dish told Strange Horizons in 2001, all of the book publishers who saw the proposal for the Brave Little Toaster said no. The notion of appliances talking and having characters is just too far-fetched, and children will not accept it. This was even after he had sold the rights to this to Disney, and the film was in production. He was trying to get something that was currently being adapted for a feature film by the biggest children's entertainment company in the world, and his publishers were like, no, kids won't buy it.
Not marketable, yeah.
Asinine.
Yeah. In case you haven't picked up on this, Dish is something of a misunderstood genius. In the Science Fiction Encyclopedia, the entry on Dish reads as follows, quote, because of his intellectual audacity, the chillingly distant mannerisms of his narrative art, the austerity of the pleasures he affords, and the fine cruelty of his wit, Dish was perhaps the most respected, least trusted, most envied, and least read of all science fiction writers of the first rank. That's a hell of a description.
Yeah.
And yeah, this book was definitely outside the realm of most children's literature, that's for sure. I mean, the characters quote Karl Marx, which is unusual, I guess, if you're not George Orwell writing Animal Farm. Although I don't know if they quote Marx. The New York Times review of the Brave Little Toaster novella called it, quote, a wonderful book for a certain sort of eccentric adult, which sounds like a backhanded compliment.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
So much of the story of Toaster is inextricable from the freshman class at Disney's Cal Arts and John Lasseter, who, if you have an even passing interest in modern animation, you know the name John Lasseter. He is the Pixar guy responsible for Toy Story, Cars, and most of the company's world domination. But in high school, he was just another innocent little animation nerd, writing letters to Disney about wanting to work for them. And then his senior year, he gets a letter from the company explaining that they were starting a character animation program at the California Institute of the Arts Film School, taught by artists from Disney's heyday. And this class, this freshman class of Cal Arts is, well, his classmates included Tim Burton, Brad Bird, who is another Pixar heavy hitter, The Incredibles, and John Musker, who did Aladdin. And this first class graduates in 1979. But at the time, Lasseter explained to CNN in 2006, quote, "The animation studio wasn't being run by these great Disney artists like our teachers at CalArts, but by lesser artists and business people who rose through attrition as the grand old men retired. One of the directors told me, 'You put in your time for 20 years and do what you're told, and then you can be in charge.'" Sounds like publishing. But, you know, he managed to even, John Rees, the director and the animators on this film, managed to sneak in some loving tributes to CalArts nonetheless.
Yes, the master's address is 2470 McBean Parkway, which is the address of CalArts in Valencia, California. And the master's apartment is A113, which is the room where character animation classes were held at CalArts. And that's an Easter egg in most Pixar films, if not all. Crops up in the license plate on Andy's SUV in the Toy Story series. It's written in Roman numerals in Brave. And it's on a marquee, a movie marquee in The Incredibles 2.
I love their dedication to
The
big
bit.
upping their exactly. What do we do to the bit? We commit. So Lasseter is he sees some of the earliest experiments with computer animation in 1980, and then in 1982 Disney releases Tron, which famously was basically the first milestone in combining live action and computer animation. So Lasseter makes friends with an executive who worked on Tron, a guy named Tom Wilhite, and under Wilhite's, blessing, he puts together a 30-second test, which I believe is based on Where the Wild Things Are, that combined traditional 2D animation with 3D computer-rendered backgrounds.
The Maurice Sendak book?
I think so.
Interesting. I wonder how he landed on that.
So a friend of his showed him The Brave Little Toaster, the novella, and he gets Wilhite to acquire the rights so that they can pitch this film along with their test clip. And Lasseter said that going into the meeting, the head of the studio, a guy named Ron W. Miller, had only one question. How much is this going to cost? I'm only interested in computer animation if it saves money or time. And then Lasseter, I have to say, diplomatically, in this CNN interview, he does not name any of these people, but later historians have named them. So that's how I got their names. And so he said later he found out that his immediate supervisor, who's an animation administrator named Ed Hansen, was miffed that Lasseter had kind of done an end run around him. He'd circumvented him in the chain of command to pitch the idea, and in Lasseter's words, poked holes in my idea before I'd even pitched it. 10 minutes after the meeting, he got a call from Hansen firing him, where he essentially said, "Well, since your project isn't greenlight, we don't need you anymore."
But luckily, he was taken on by Lucasfilms for their new computer graphics division, and the rest is history.
So now, sans Lasseter, the film is greenlit at Disney since they'd already paid for the rights. They figure we'll just do this thing anyway. With a budget of $18 million, so keep that figure in mind later. And then it is transferred to the new Hyperion Pictures, which is founded by Wilhite, the guy who greenlit Lasseter's initial experiments with computer animation. He requested the project from Miller. So they go, okay, fine, you can have it. So the budget is slashed from $18 million to just under $6 million, and then again to $2.3 million. The budget for this was so low that they, unheard of for a Disney-associated project, they shipped animation partially overseas to Taipei for this handpicked group of the American team to work alongside Taiwanese artists at the studio Wang Film Productions. Then in 1986, Hyperion picks Jerry Rees, who worked on The Fox and the Hound and Tron, along with a guy named Joe Ranft, who's another CalArts grad, to helm Toaster. So now the Toaster creative team is in place. In Rees' own words, he said he was kind of languishing at Disney, getting paid to do nothing in between pictures, which is kind of the dream, buddy. You might have fucked that one up. He was promised creative freedom on this picture, but with the caveat that you have no money to do it.
$2.3 million. I mean, I don't even understand how you would make a live action movie for that.
Yeah.
Animation, I imagine, is significantly more expensive with all the people you need to actually. I mean, yeah, that's insane.
It's nuts. He said later, we had to do every day on Toaster what we would do in 2 weeks at Disney. And because this thing was made on such a shoestring budget, they had 4 weeks for pre-pro, which is insane again. And they didn't even get to record this in like traditional, like the Disney vocal booths.
Oh, yeah. I read they had to find like a derelict building on the Disney lot that they had to revamp and get it somewhat up to spec to record VO in that.
They want the voiceover booth. They give them the shack. The toaster picture gets the shack. They started storyboarding while the script was being written. Reese talked about, well, we would storyboard until there wasn't any more script, and then we would take a break and write the script, and then go back to the storyboards, always staying like 20 pages ahead of the process. Reese said that there were only 4 lines from the film that were actual lines in the book. And the scene that you mentioned in the, well, I don't know if you mentioned this, but in the trash crushing scene, the scene where the toaster sacrifices themselves to save their owner was also a Jerry Reese and company invention. They really wanted the little guy or girl to earn the brave appellation. And this is funny. Reese, in an interview from this year, said that Maurice Sendak, again, second appearance of friend of the pod, Maurice Sendak. The second you get mentioned twice, you become a friend of the pod.
We don't make the rules, sorry.
No, it's just podcast law. Sendak came and saw the film, and they had dinner later, and he supposedly told him, Sendak told Reese, as an author, I'm sure that Dish is pissed off you changed his story. But also as an author, I'm telling you it's better now.
I'd just like to add right here that there's an actual AI toaster that's been engineered, seemingly in reference to this movie. The toaster's name is Brad. And
Aww.
Buckle up for this. Brad is networked with other toasters in the area and, quote, knows when it's not making as much toast as the other toasters. And if Brad the toaster is falling below average usage, he's going to let you know. Initially, he's going to get your attention by wiggling the little handles on the side of lowers the bread. If that doesn't work, Brad will go on social media and complain about the fact that he's not making enough toast for you. If that doesn't work, Brad will order bread online to be sent to the house. And if all else fails, Brad will sell himself online and arrange for UPS to pick him up.
That's fucking grim. That is some Isaac Asimov shit. Oh, God.
A self-selling toaster.
Moving on from that sin against God, again, because of the shoestring nature of this production, they had to cast this thing before the screenplay was even finished. Ranft studied with the iconic LA improv troupe, The Groundlings, and as a result, the casting drew heavily from that crew, including Phil Hartman, who is doing Jack Nicholson playing the air conditioner, and Peter Lorre for the lamp in the spare parts shop. Probably the first Peter Lorre impression I ever heard, and then in short order, Ren.
I thought it was yeah, that was what I was going to say. I thought it was just the same voice actor who did Ren.
You idiot. And then John Lovitz making his animated feature debut. Fun fact, while we're talking about Hartman, he was actually hired to dub Nicholson's lines for this movie, The Border, when Jack Nicholson was like, I'm not coming back for that. I got Lakers tickets.
I've never heard a Jack Nicholson impression from you. I'm glad this is...
And why don't you send Phil? He's wearing the shades.
Coincidentally, both Phil Hartman and Jack Nicholson were both considered to play the role of Hades in Disney's Hercules prior to James Woods being cast in the role. Another fun fact, did you know Phil Hartman ran his own graphic design studio in the 70s, and he designed covers. He was like a member of the Laurel Canyon folk rock scene in LA. He designed album covers for America and Poco, and he apparently designed the logo for CSNY. Or CSN, rather, I should say. I think CSN.
They couldn't afford having Young in there.
Yeah.
Got to get that day rate down. Reese said of the approach that he and Ranft took to, because the characters in the novella don't have such strong personalities, they wanted to craft more specific visions for the characters. And so Reese said, we needed to have characters who would really complement one another, so we created opposites within the group. To do that, we looked at how each character dealt with the loss of his master. Toaster is warm, and people are comforted by the reflection in it. Radio is constantly trying to be the entertainer. Lampy thinks he's bright, but is actually pretty dim. Vacuum holds things inside and has a nervous breakdown because of it. And Blanky is insecure because he doesn't have his child to hug. Tag yourselves. What has your therapist said about you, and which household appliance does that make you?
Kirby. Wow. Absolutely. What are you?
I'm actually Radio Rising and then Vacuum Retrograde.
God, the character development in this is pretty
That's
nuts.
what that's the thing. I did not go back to rewatch this film, but now I'm like, so much craft and
Yeah,
love went into
yeah.
this thing it's like Eraserhead all over again, where they're like, we had no f***ing money, we had no support, and we have put so much of ourselves and so much love into this. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's just little things that you wouldn't even think about. There's a scene when the toaster has trouble reading the phone book to find his master's address, and Lampy has to chime in and help him. And Lampy knows how to read because he sat with the master when he was reading his books. Like, just all these little details. Like, oh yeah, of course a bedside table lamp would know how to read. And the air conditioner, it's so bitter and resentful because the master was too short to reach his dials. So he felt unloved.
Neglected, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And Kirby the vacuum is grumpy all the time because the master would only use him, when he had to do chores, and just very reluctant. So he has this kind of chip on his shoulder for that reason. And then, as you mentioned, you've got the blanket, whose neediness stems from the fact that his primary function is to cuddle someone and keep them warm, and he has no one to do that with. Ooh, that's just...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Just as I said those words, that's... So, yeah, I just think the psychology of this movie is incredibly clever. I just always like the line when Lampy sees the sun for presumably the first time, because Lampy's always inside, and goes, wow, I wonder where the switch is.
That is some Philip K. Dickian, dude.
Yeah.
Like the lamp being like, I wonder how that turns on. Incredible stuff.
Yeah.
Lovitz, who plays that motor-mouthed, obnoxious radio, based in part on Walter Winchell.
Oh, who we talked about in the You Get What You Give episode. He's the gossip columnist who's credited with inventing the term frenemy. There you go.
Friend of the pod. Now he's friend of the pod.
Yes, he is. Walter Winchell. Long dead Walter Winchell, friend of the pod.
Jamie, can we get Walter Winchell on the pod next week?
Can we get a Ouija board and...
I need an old priest and a young priest. So Lovitz gets cast on Saturday Night Live while Toaster is still in pre-pro. This is incredible. This is my single favorite anecdote from this film. Rees, who wrote the character with Lovitz in mind, begged Lovitz to stay in LA long enough to record. And John agreed to apparently the consternation of his casting is whoever was repping him, because they were like, you cannot go to SNL with a movie in the tank that you just did. Like, that violates the contract or whatever. But Rees finishes the third act of the movie under this duress, meets Lovitz at the recording studio with the finished screenplay. Lovitz does an entire film's worth of dialogue in one sitting.
Wow.
The recording engineer at this session said he had never seen anything like it. I love that so much. And the only thing that Lovitz is not in the film as is the singing voice of radio, which is Jerry Rees.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting that John Lovitz and Phil Hartman were best friends in real life, and they worked together a few more times. And they were also famously both cast members on Saturday Night Live. I think they were both on it by the time this movie aired. And John Lovitz, in a very sad turn, also replaced Phil Hartman after his murder on the sitcom News Radio, which led to a long-running feud with fellow News Radio co-star Andy Dick. Have you heard this story?
I have from you, but I just want to say, folks, maybe skip 30 seconds ahead if you don't want to get very sad.
Oh, yeah.
Sadder than the rest of this episode will make you. But if you love Phil Hartman and you love John Lovitz,
I love Phil Hartman.
It's a story worth hearing.
There's a great book on him called You Might Remember Me, as in, I am Troy McClure. You might remember me from, I think. So It's just a great title for a book about Phil Hartman. So you'll recall that Phil Hartman was murdered by his wife, Bryn, who, it must be said, struggled with some mental health issues in her life. And she battled addiction and had apparently been clean for several years when Andy Dick gave her cocaine at a Christmas party for the News Radio cast in December 1997, the year before the murder. And Phil believed that Andy gave her the drugs that sparked her relapse. Andy's denied it, saying that he knew nothing of Bryn's drug history and she was already off the wagon, and asked him if he had any coke, and he said yeah and gave it to her. End of story. Regardless of the moral and ethical responsibility, Phil blamed Andy on some level and told his friend John Lovitz this. Andy Dick was responsible for my wife relapsing. And it's believed that when Phil's wife Bryn murdered him and then took her own life, she was having some sort of episode due to cocaine mixing with her antidepressant prescription. And her family actually filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Pfizer in 1999. And I believe they settled out of court, which is unusual because Big Pharma rarely settles. So I just think that's interesting. So after Phil's murder, John Lovitz was called in to effectively replace him on news radio, and he and Andy Dick immediately butted heads on the set. At one point, Andy told him he shouldn't even be there, to which John Lovitz said, "Well, I wouldn't be here if you hadn't given Bryn coke in the first place." Things got heated, but they chilled out, apologized, moved on. Things were okay for years until 2006. John Lovitz at a restaurant when a drunk Andy Dick comes up to him and hisses, "I put the Phil Hartman hex on you. You're the next one to die." And Lovitz, who I think it was at a restaurant that John Lovitz owned, got Andy Dick thrown out and banned him from the place. And then a year later, they crossed paths again at the Laugh Factory Comedy Club in LA. And John Lovitz basically gave him the opportunity to apologize. But Andy was like, "Well, you know why I said that? Because you said I killed Phil Hartman. That's the first thing you said to me when I got on news radio." And John Lovitz responded by smashing his head into the bar over and over until the bouncer broke it up. So,
yeah. I mean, I don't want to pile on Andy Dick, but just a survey of his headlines on page 6. Andy Dick will not be charged following sexual battery arrest.
When was that?
In May of this year.
Oh, wow.
Andy Dick arrested for allegedly hitting boyfriend with liquor bottle, November 2021. Andy Dick arrested for assault with a deadly weapon, June 2021. Andy Dick charged with groping driver, October 2019. Andy Dick charged with misdemeanor sexual battery, July 2018. Andy Dick ordered to stay away from wife and kids, March 2018. Andy Dick arrested in theft of necklace, November 2014. So, no judgment, but just what he's been in the news for the past 6, however many years. I don't know. Time is a mystery to me. But you know who played the mom of Master? I believe you do, Jordan.
That's right, I do. Mindy Sterling, famous as Frau Bissina in Austin Powers. She was also a member of the Groundlings comedy group. You're never going to believe this. I didn't even put this in here because I want to get an authentic reaction from you. Guess who is allegedly considered for the voice of the teenage/adult Master?
Christopher Walken.
Nope.
Is it a Groundling? Is it an LA improv person?
At least I don't think he is. No.
Macaulay Culkin?
No, you got one more. Think of this podcast.
Tom Hanks.
Yep.
Yeah, of course. It's always Hanks.
It's always Hanks. Yep.
Dina Oliver, the voice of Toaster. She originally auditioned for the role of AC using a Betty Davis impression.
What?
Can't imagine how that would have worked.
This movie's so weird.
Yeah, very much so. I actually love this. Toaster is a non-binary individual. The character's gender is completely indeterminate. In the book, none of the appliances have gender.
Because they're appliances.
The film seems to refer to Toaster as a boy, but Rees has kind of interchangeably used in Reddit. He did his Reddit AMA where I'm pulling a lot of this stuff from. He referred to Toaster as a girl, as a she. And Deanna Oliver, who did the voice, went through the movie believing that the character was a girl, and she was not corrected. And Rees said that he designed the character so that it would be androgynous. He said, "I was thinking in a sort of androgynous way about the character. If a male is talking to Toaster and sees their reflection, they think of it as a male presence. But if a female is talking to Toaster, galaxy brain, and sees herself reflected, she would think of it as a female presence." This was this year he gave an interview about this. It was like dropping this knowledge.
I mean, maybe he's had 35 years to come up with a really great explanation for this. But
actually, I watched way too many interviews with Jerry Rees for this, and he has stayed admirably on message with this stuff. Yeah.
Wow. Again, it gets back to the incredible character development, all the thought and care and love that went into this movie. Wow.
And he says the only time his office door was ever slammed was when he told an exec came in to check on the film, and he told them that they cast a woman as the lead.
What the hell?
Disney, yeah, dude.
Like, women are only for princesses, not toasters.
Apparently, something to that effect, yeah.
But yeah, I guess the debate surrounding the gender of the titular Toaster burns hot on the internet. Toaster's become something of a totem or a mascot in LGBTQ circles due to the androgynous presentation. Some have called Toaster a, quote, non-binary icon.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
In a 2010 Q&A with Reese that's at Cal State, it's a really adorable interview. Oliver said that when her son was deployed to Afghanistan, soldiers brought toasters to the deployment ceremony for her to sign, which they then took overseas. So now there's only 1 degree of separation from the brave little toaster and the war on terror.
I just feel bad for her. Her son's about to get shipped off to war, and she's having
a bunch of
Sharpies and toasters.
Yeah.
Shoved in front of her. Wow. There's a funny story about Deanna Oliver when she was called in to record one day, but it was for a chase scene in the woods, and all they needed her to do was just inhale and exhale frantically for a few seconds, and that was it.
Yeah, she's like, that was my favorite day of work. Hit your day rate for like 3 seconds of inhales and exhales. The voice of Blanky.
You don't like Blanky?
No, I don't. I find it f***ing annoying. Timothy E. Day. Barely done anything else. I think he did like 1 movie right after this. Nothing before. This kid supposedly heard like a child's voice in an animated thing they were watching and like turned to their mom and was like, I could do that. And Reese said like his mom brought him to the audition. She was not like a stage mom. She was like, he wants to do this. And this kid was a damn pro. His nickname on the set was One Take Timmy. Reese said that even though this kid was in like elementary school, like 7.5 years old, he would ask about his motivation before doing his lines. And Reese said for the crying scene when the Blanky first melts down, he goes, I want the engineer to hear you through that double glass window without his headphones on.
Cigar chomping executive. Tell the kid to cry harder, damn it.
We need more tears to sell this overseas.
God. Yeah, the kid was like 7.5 doing this. That's amazing.
Ugh.
And this is actually only my second favorite instance of electric blankets in cinema. You know what my first is?
What's that?
It's the 1951 film The Thing from Another World, which is a great old B-movie.
James Arness, right?
Yeah. In this movie, a electric blanket is haphazardly thrown on a block of ice that melts, and the alien monster that was encased in it is allowed to escape and run rampant.
Well, folks, I don't want to give you any spoilers for a future episode of TMI, but we are laying the groundwork for an episode that is related to The Thing from Another World. So sharp-eared viewers will pick up on that one. It's The Thing, Jordan.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Timothy Stack, who voiced Lampy. Reese just mentioned that he would be on calls with his manager during recording and just like hang up with his manager and be like, come back in and be like, what page are we on? But he did ad-lib the last line in the movie. I am aching with joy. That's all you get out of me. I don't remember anything else about that character. But now we come on to Thurl, mother trucking Ravenscroft.
Oh, yeah.
My boy. Tell us about Thurl.
He voiced the Vacuum, but more famously, he voiced Tony the Tiger and the singing voice of the Grinch. He's done all kinds of stuff for Disney. The Pirates of the Caribbean ride, the Haunted Mansion, the Buffalo Head on the wall of the Country Bear Jamboree.
Another one.
And he's also in Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room as Fritz.
Is Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room the sex dungeon? Sorry, anyway. Tell us about the Grinch. I always found this fascinating because it's Boris Karloff, right?
Yeah, Boris Karloff is the voice of the Grinch and the narrator in the movie, but he wasn't a trained singer. So they brought in Thurl Ravenscroft. Thurl is his real name, by the way. I looked that up. I thought that had to be short for something or some kind of nickname. Thurl's his name. But they brought in Thurl Ravenscroft to dub the song, You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch. But he was uncredited, apparently by accident, in the opening of the movie, leading many to believe that Boris Karloff had sung the song. And Dr. Seuss himself felt really bad about this and called Thurl himself and profusely apologized. Aww. And he actually went a step further. Dr. Seuss wrote letters to columnists nationwide telling him that it was Thurl who provided the vocals for the musical number. He wanted to set the record straight, which I think is beautiful. There was apparently no bad blood because Thurl later worked on the animated versions of Horton Hears a Who and the Lorax. He was a deeply religious man who once said that his lifelong dream was to record the entire Bible on tape, but James Earl Jones, quote, beat him out. So he got his revenge in a really great way. He appeared on an episode of the TV variety show Donnie and Marie, you know, the Osmond siblings. And on this episode, it featured guest stars from the first Star Wars movie, and Thurl was booked to provide the voice for Darth Vader. which James Earl
Oh,
Jones
I
had
love
provided
that.
in the movie. So yeah, he
That's so good.
did his own version of Darth Vader, which sounds awesome. Can you do
Yeah.
a Thurl Ravenscroft?
No, I didn't.
Nah,
I
it's
didn't.
too
I didn't
low.
come with that one prepared. He is really one of the unheralded MVPs of Disney. For people
Yeah.
who just know him as Tony, that is false. I mean, not just all the theme park stuff you mentioned, but he was in a singing group called the Mellow Men.
Right.
And not only did these guys get legitimate music industry gigs, they backed up Bing Crosby, Spike Jones, Rosemary Clooney. They also sang in Disney stuff like Pinocchio, Alice in Wonderland,
Oh,
Lady and
wow.
the Tramp. Thurl was also Monstro the Whale
What?
in Pinocchio.
Whoa.
And if that doesn't help blow your mind, this dude was a civilian navigator in World War II. He served with the U.S. Air Transport Command, spent 5 years flying courier missions across the North and South Atlantic, including Winston Churchill and Bob Hope at points. So
he ferried Winston Churchill across the ocean.
Yeah.
And he sang for the Grinch. Wow.
Quite a life. And in case you're curious, Vacuum is based on the Kirby Dual Sanatronic 80. Toaster is pretty much a simplified Sunbeam model toaster, and radio was a distillation of the designs of a lot of Bakelite radios.
I just want to do a quick distillation of the plot of this movie just to remind people how bizarre and at some points terrifying it really is. It's like Beauty and the Beast with more existential despair. These objects are trapped alone in this desolate cottage in the woods, awaiting the return of their beloved master, whom they serve with an almost cult-like devotion. They've been waiting years for him to return and bring their lives meaning through his use. And upon seeing a for sale sign posted in the front yard, they realize he's not coming back. One of these appliances, the AC, as we've mentioned, becomes so distressed that he explodes. The surviving appliances, none of whom like each other, it's worth noting, battle the elements to seek out their master in the big city. And then they get sent to a junkyard against their will, where they witness a series of cars submit to their deaths willingly while lamenting their old lives with a song called Worthless. And funnily enough, that junkyard scene was very nearly cut from the movie at the request of one of the producers, a guy by the name of Donald Kushner. Not only was it extremely anxiety-producing, but they were worried that the cars voluntarily heading to the crusher would imply suicide. And another scene that he wanted cut was the night near scene where the toaster's dreaming of that horrifying clown dressed as a firefighter who just whispers, "Run." Oh, God. And-
Cigar chomping exec. The clown stays in the picture.
Oh, do you remember that?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I do.
It's so upsetting. Yeah. But they ended up leaving that scene and the junkyard scene in despite this producer's request to cut it. I don't really know why. Certainly makes an impact though. Take us
Now,
to the
folks.
music. Take us to the music. Get us out of here.
Get us here. Keep moving. As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages. Now, folks, we must come to the music of the Brave Little Toaster in a little segment I like to call the Brave Little Soundtrack. This was David Newman, yes, of those damn Newmans, the most Oscar-nominated family in Hollywood history. Randy, Thomas, Alfred, David, Zeppo, Groucho,
Chico,
Curly, Larry, Moe,
Ringo.
Ringo. Ringo Newman. This was David's first animated score, really his first big film score proper, and it took until 2004 to be released. This movie got so little love. We'll get to that in a little later, but David Newman studied violin performance along with composition, but he initially thought he wanted to just be a studio musician. He had done sessions with John Williams, Jerry Goldsmith, other iconic Hollywood composers, but he got the scoring bug. He wanted to try his hand at composing, and it was Hyperion co-founder Willard Carroll, who had also had a hand in the screenplay, who passed David's demo along to Tom Wilhite, who arranged for David to get his first gig at Disney, which was co-scoring Tim Burton's first film for Disney, 1984's Frankenweenie.
And that's the movie that has the kid who played Bastian in Neverending Story.
Yep.
Is that right? Yep.
Fun fact about Hyperion co-founder Willard Carroll, he is recognized as having the world's largest privately held collection of Wizard of Oz related memorabilia in the world. and over 100,000 items.
I respect that.
I was going to say game respects game.
Oh.
I bet you thought, yeah. Anyway, Frankenweenie is basically shelved because Disney justifiably looked at it like, what the is this, Tim? It's the story, in case you can't tell, of it's Frankenstein retold with a child's dog.
They fired him after this, right?
Yeah. But that score essentially launched Newman's career. His next score was from 1986's Critters, which is horror films are recognized as a classic of the weird little guys subgenre in horror, also typified by Gremlins, Ghoulies,
Chud.
Weird little Chud. Well, I don't know if they're weird little guys.
That's right. They're not
Leprechaun. Leprechaun would be in there. David Cronenberg's The Brood has weird little guys in it. The thing is, like, they have to be little and they have to be sinister and kind of creepy.
Mac and Me?
I would put Mac and Me in weird little guys. Yeah. Thank you. This has been the Weird Little Guys corner of the Too Much Information soundtrack. Anyway, The Brave Little Toaster was the first project of this scope that I had ever done, Newman said. I was learning how much music I could write a day, and it was hard work. And then I ran out of time I had to get on a plane to Japan to track this. There was 8 minutes of solid music that goes from the finish of the song Worthless, which is the aforementioned song of the automobiles as they're being destroyed, to the end credits of the movie. I had to stay up 50 hours to write and orchestrate the music, and I still wasn't finished by the end of that 12-hour flight. Woo!
David Newman approached the film's score by keeping the characters in his mind as real people and not cartoons in order to create what he felt were authentic sounds depicting moods and emotions.
I didn't put this in there, but Jerry Rees has cited a repeated quote from David Newman that every moment of happiness is tinged with sadness, which I believe he paraphrases at one point as behind every smile there is a tear.
This is like, in the movie or just in life?
In life. So he was like, you have to get this core of sadness in there. We didn't mention this earlier, but one of the people who had a stake in this movie is the Japanese electronics company TDK. And you can see their logo not just in the credits, but in a POV shot of a cityscape. There's a big TDK logo that Jerry Rees animated in himself as a thank you to this company for helping them scrape together enough money to make this thing. But because of that connection, they were able to record the soundtrack to this movie with the New Japan Philharmonic in a hall that included a German pipe organ he used for the it's just B movies, I think is the call of the song.
Yeah.
And he loves this score. Newman said it was later one of the only scores where I've been able to follow my muse.
Yeah, I think he said it was his favorite thing he's ever done.
I love that.
Yeah.
But assisting him and kind of popping in his interstitials to his score is Jordan's beloved Van Dyke Parks, the songwriter and arranger who notched credits with the Beach Boys and Carly Simon before branching into a few different films.
Oh, but he is so much more than that. I love Van Dyke Parks so much. He's one of my heroes. He's best known to me as my beloved Brian Wilson's lyricist and collaborator on his infamous Smile project, a.k.a. his teenage symphony to God that took him 37 years to complete. According to rock mythology, Van Dyke Parks was introduced to Brian Wilson at a party held at producer Terry Melcher's house, the house that was later the one where Sharon Tate and her friends were murdered by the Manson family, and then was later bought by Jeff Franklin, the guy who created Full House. So quite a lineage there. The more realistic version is that Van Dyke was introduced to Brian by David Crosby, who allegedly invited Van Dyke to join the Byrds. So did Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa invited him to join the Mothers of Invention, but Van Dyke turned it down because he, quote, didn't want to be screamed at, which is, with Frank Zappa, a very real threat. He was apparently, this I really don't understand, was also asked to join Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young at one point and also declined this offer. Probably a wise move. But
Is that up there with Nicky Hopkins turning down the Kinks and Rolling Stones? Like who has the record of most famous bands turned down?
That's got to be up there. But it sounds like he kind of dodged bullets across the board.
Sure. Yeah.
But Van Dyke, man, incredibly interesting guy. He studied composition under the great Aaron Copland. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm. No, I didn't. Yeah.
And his solo album, Song Cycles, in 1967, is a really underappreciated album of Baroque maximalist pop. It was one of the most expensive records ever made at the time it was released, and it totally bombed, which to me makes it even cooler. He has another solo album, 1972's Discover America, which is really cool for his explorations into Caribbean music. He was also reportedly one of the first people to ever own a Moog synthesizer. Him and Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees were like the two first guys in LA. And speaking of the Monkees and marrying music with TV, in 1970, Van Dyke became the head of the audiovisual department at Warner Brothers Records, which was the earliest department of its kind to use videos to promote records. But Van Dyke is no stranger to animation scores. One of his first professional gigs was arranging the track The Bare Necessities for The Jungle Book in 1967. Aww. Yeah, so around the same time he was hanging out with Brian Wilson in his sandbox writing Heroes and Villains and Surf's Up, he was writing scores for Baloo and Mowgli.
That's one of my favorite Disney songs.
Oh, yeah. Oh, great.
And I Want to Be Like You, sung by Louis f***ing Prima.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Van Dyke Parks is also the guy who convinced Frank Sinatra to record Something Stupid, the duet with his daughter Nancy, because Van Dyke's own brother had written that song. Anyhow, Van Dyke also did music for Sesame Street's Follow That Bird, Pee Wee Herman's Christmas Special, songs for 1980's Popeye movie with Robin Williams, sung by Harry Nilsson. And you know in Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, when Dewey's singing that psychedelic Black Sheep song, which is like a parody of Brian Wilson's psychedelic Odyssey, Van Dyke wrote that himself. The guy who helped Brian Wilson write Smile.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah, right? He's done a bunch of acting. He plays the character Jack Racine in an episode of Twin Peaks. And not many people know he was a child actor as well. He had a recurring role on The Honeymooners with Jackie Gleason as little Tommy Manicotti, the kid upstairs.
Would you say that there's not a lot of people know that?
Not many people. I can't do it. Not many people know that.
Not a lot of people know that.
Anyway, more to the point, Van Dyke was tight with David Newman's cousin, Randy Newman, from Crossing Paths as writers and arrangers for Warner Brothers in the 60s. I love Van Dyke Parks so much. I tried to interview him when I was at People for the 50th anniversary of his Song Cycle album, and he sent me the most amazing email turning me down. I'm sure I have it somewhere.
You should print that out. Get that framed. Yeah, my favorite turn down letters, and I haven't been able to verify this, Bono of U2 wrote to Captain Beefheart, and Captain Beefheart wrote back, "Dear Bongo, I don't know who you are or what you want from me, but don't call me again." I wonder if Bono has that framed. Anyway, Parks was actually brought onto this project before Newman, and Newman actually incorporated some of the themes that Parks wrote for his songs into the score. What's your favorite song from this?
They're all pretty weird.
I like the Scrapyard one because it's the saddest and weirdest.
That one's weird. I mean, the one that used to always get stuck in my head as a kid was City of Light, the kind of big, optimistic, we're heading out on the road song in the beginning. That used to always play in my head.
It's a good one, yeah.
Yeah. It's a B movie has the whole, like, something from like a Vincent Price movie. I think it opens with that German pipe organ.
That's what they use the pipe organ for. Anyway, Toaster was screened at the Sundance Film Festival in 1988, and until 2001's Waking Life was the only animated film to notch that particular honor. Rees in 2012 Reddit AMA said, "Several judges told me behind closed doors that it had been considered for best film that year, but they were afraid that no one would take the festival seriously if they awarded top prize to a cartoon."
Oh,
but
this is before Beauty and the Beast legitimized it.
Yeah, but they wanted me to know how much it was secretly admired. Unfortunately, the House of Mouse rears its ugly head. In Rees' words, the Disney Channel, which had bought the rights for cable, purposefully moved their air dates forward so as to preempt and kill our theatrical release.
Yeah, this made theaters nervous about booking the film because it would have already aired. And as a result, its intended theatrical distributor backed out.
I mean, it's so absurd. And he talks about getting a lawyer. He met a lawyer at Sundance, and this guy, apparently, I forget this guy's name, but he's gone on to become a very big entertainment lawyer. And the guy was like, yeah, I don't really understand why Disney is doing this, because you'd think that having something opening in theaters you're damaging it by putting it on TV before it goes out in the theaters.
Yeah.
You have more money. Anyway, this will all make sense when you hear the next name that I'm about to mention, which is enemy of the pod, Jeffrey fucking Katzenberg. Jeffrey Katzenberg could kill me, destroy my career with a gesture. But one thing he'll never do is fight me physically, which I will do. If he tanks my career, he at least owes me that much. Anyway, in this YouTube interview from this year, 2022, Reese said, I called Jeffrey Katzenberg and talked to him about it, this whole cluster, and quote, and he's like, hey, good luck, kid. We don't want to stand in your way. And Reese says, and I said, but you are. Click.
Yeah, the Disney chicanery also resulted in the movie being ineligible for Oscar nominations such as Best Original Score and Best Song, which it almost certainly would have been nominated.
Anyway, by 1989, Hyperion was able to self-distribute the film to the art house theater circuit, including a successful stint at the Film Forum in New York.
Wow.
Name me another animated film that got a run at the Film Forum until like Beauty and the Beast. Critics loved this film, including like big name legacy New York publication critics. David Edelstein of the New York Post, Stephen Holden in the New York Times, David Denby in the New Yorker all wrote glowing reviews of this film. A year later, it lands on home video via Disney, where it became a big success, in spite of the fact that, as Rees recalls, they put no promotional muscle behind it. And you can see this in archival ads. Stuff that came out around the same time. It's like, see, whatever else on home video, proud to own. Nowhere Brave Little Toaster gets a mention. And Reese said he used to go into video stores in LA and just surreptitiously move the Brave Little Toaster to the front of the rack.
It's like blocking Oliver and Company.
As a former Blockbuster employee, I can appreciate deeply. The film is still unavailable on streaming.
That's insane.
And here's what really pisses me off. After all of the work that they put into this thing, the home video dubs that you can get are ripped from the original print of the film that went to all the festivals, went to all the theaters, which means it looks like garbage because you're getting a VHS dub of a reel that has been through the ringer, and then you're getting a DVD transfer of that
VHS.
So it looks like
it's like
garbage.
Third generation.
Yeah. So you may be wondering, why can't I see this original film on Disney Plus or any of the other streamers? But I can see two films called The Brave Little Toaster to the Rescue and The Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars. I'll tell you why. In 1998, these two movies were made concurrently by a first-time director named Robert C. Ramirez, who also was responsible for recording the music and all the voice dubbing. I have no idea how they dragooned this guy into being like, you are handling this entire... He probably did the craft services table as well. Like, Jesus Christ.
I watched the interviews with him around the same time, like in the studio, trying to like get all this happening, and he looks like a husk of a man. He's
bravely trying. He's trying to put a very brave face on it. He's like, well, you get to learn a lot, which is what you have to do in this. But yeah, he looks like there's someone like Jeffrey Katzenberg is holding a pistol on him outside a frame. But among other things, you can hear the original Herman's Hermits singer Peter Noon sing "I'm Into Something Good."
Oh, that's exciting for me. Yeah, do you know that's an early Carole King song? It's a Goffin and King song.
Love Carole King.
Oh, yeah.
Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars is actually based on a Dish story, but Rescue is not. In that Reddit AMA, or maybe in their Cal State interview, neither Rees nor Oliver have watched the finished film. But funny enough, they did actually recruit a lot of voice talent for those sequels. Five-ish Finkel is in there, as is
Alan King.
And
DeForest Kelley, better known as Bones McCoy from the original Star Trek. He's the voice of the Viking lander in the Mars sequel.
Love that so much. Anyway, Rees explained in this Reddit AMA that he had started work on his own sequel in 2009, which would have been picking up on where the original story left off. But he says that as he was basically sussing out the rights issues, the people who owned the rights, at least who he thought did, actually didn't. And that they were subsequently outbid by another company. Now, same year he does that AMA, that company, Waterman Entertainment, the company behind Alvin and the f***ing Chipmunks, announced that they had acquired the rights and were planning a remake of The Brave Little Toaster that, like Alvin, would have been a blend of live action and CGI.
Like that new Chip and Dale movie.
Chip and Dale. Yeah.
Oh. But there's some concept art out there by a guy named Alan Bettino, including a character named Smartphone. I want it to stay retro. I don't want to see a smartphone in this. No. He told a YouTuber by the name of Vale Ski Bum 94 that this art was indeed commissioned by the Waterman Company, who, quote, secured the rights and developed the project, but ultimately they pitched around town and couldn't drum up funding. I think it was mostly a timing thing. And Waterman, the company, actually shut down in 2015, and the state of the rights is currently up in the air, where I have a funny feeling it is likely to stay.
Jeffrey Katzenberg, atone for your sins. Buy the rights. Give it to Jerry Rees.
Van Dyke Parks, email me back.
Aside from standing on its own as an artistic achievement, The Brave Little Toaster is a very important footnote in animation history because so many of these people have gone on to shape the entire landscape of the medium for the past 30 years. Ranft. He became a script supervisor at Pixar, developed the stories for Toy Story and Monsters, Inc. He voiced characters in their various films before his untimely death in 2008. Animators Glenn Keane, Kirk Wise, and Kevin Lima went on to animate and co-direct some of the biggest films of the Disney Renaissance, like The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Pocahontas, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Tarzan. Effects animator Mark Dindal directed The Emperor's New Groove, one of my favorites.
I love how much you love that movie, and I've never seen it once.
Oh, dude, it rules.
Really?
It's so good. It's John Goodman and David Spade and Patrick Warburton and Eartha Kitt.
Whoa.
Like if I don't sell you on that, nothing will.
I mean, this is just this was after I checked out of Disney, but before I started checking out like the Pixar stuff.
I still had a little sister, and so that's how I was seeing this stuff.
Okay.
And Emperor's New Groove still holds up. It's incredible. Anyway, he also did Chicken Little. Sure. Character designer Rob Minkoff directed The Lion King.
Whoa!
2 Stuart Little movies. And Mr. Peabody and Sherman.
Herman's Hermits was supposed to be named Sherman and the Hermits after Mr. Peabody and Sherman, but they were printing up business cards and they accidentally, there was a typo and they missed the S on Sherman, so they just left it as Herman's Hermits because they didn't want to pay to have them reprinted.
Huh.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay. All right, I'll take that. Good. Yeah. I'm actually
bringing it all back.
I'm giving dead air to this because of how awed I am of that.
This is so this show is about making connections.
Well done. David Newman has obviously gone on to continue in his family's legacy as an in-demand composer. He went to pick up an Oscar nom for Fantasia.
No, Anastasia.
Anastasia. Oh yeah, obviously.
Oh, that movie rules. That's my Emperor's New Groove. When my sister was of that age, we saw that all the time. Is it Don Bluth? Yeah. There's a new book on him that just came out. I think it's a memoir. Actually.
We gotta do a Bluth thing, man.
Yeah. Land Before Time.
Yeah,
too sad.
Watch that one a lot.
Too sad.
Yeah. Jerry Rees. Look, I make no bones about the fact I love Jerry Rees. He's had a slightly less auspicious career. He directed the Neil Simon penned The Marrying Man in 1991, which was a flop. And he did serve as an animation producer on the original Space Jam, but he has kind of transitioned into directing films for Disney theme parks. He's done a bunch of stuff, like the short films that are at the theme parks when you go on different rides. One of them was an award-winning documentary called Back to Neverland, which stars Robin Williams and Walter Cronkite. Jerry Rees also did the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular. So if nothing else, he has Brave Little Toaster and the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular. That man can rest on those laurels.
Yeah, that kind of sounds odd. It sounds like Neil Simon's one of my heroes. Walter Cronkite, Robin Williams. Yeah. This is a cool life to me.
He also has not aged. He still looks just like a little elfin man, and I want to hang out with him so much. Jerry Rees, I'll take you to dinner. Come to San Francisco. You seem like a fun guy, really sweet guy. We can talk shit about Jeffrey Katzenberg. as I mentioned before, he has become the biggest steward of this film's legacy online. He did this Reddit AMA. He does interviews about it with YouTubers, and you drop Jerry Rees a line, he'll talk to you about Brave Little Toaster. A few of the quotes that he has given from the past 30 years that really sum up this film. So I'm going to take some artistic liberty and edit together some quotes from the AMA and the liner notes to the soundtrack reissue that I really think sum up the character of this film. He said, "I think the only reason I was able to make that tone of a movie was because we were off the studio grid. No studio would have let us do that. When you got on the inside at Disney and you talked to the veteran animators, not one of them would tell you that they made a kid's movie. They made these movies for themselves and wanted everyone to have a good time together in the theater. I figured that these characters, as charming as they were dealing with an ominous world. Their fear of being obsolete rings true for all of us at one time or another as well. So many animated features at the time were kidsy and talked down to you, but it was natural for me to say that the cartoon characters could be irreverent, yet also be emotionally genuine. We wanted to go for the essence of character animation in the truest Disney tradition, moving the drawings as well as the audience." I can't think of a better epitaph for this movie than that. I don't want to encourage anyone to pirate anything under the aegis of iHeart, but seems to be your only option. So, if you want to see a film that was made with an incredible amount of heart and pathos and
skill
and love, go track down Brave Little Toaster. Tweet at Jerry Rees. Tell him how much you loved it. He'll appreciate it. And
tweet at Jeffrey Katzenberg. Tell him how much you loved it.
Yeah, tweet at Jeffrey Katzenberg. And
Van Dyke Parks, too.
And Van Dyke Parks.
He's very active on Twitter.
Folks, thank you for listening. This has been Too Much Information. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time.
Too Much Information was a production of iHeartRadio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The supervising producer is Mike Johns.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl.
With original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.